This is NICU Babies Parent Support with Catherine Whitaker, a podcast from Hand to Hold, a national nonprofit that provides free personalized support, resources, and community before, during, and after a NICU stay. My conversations here will focus on education and personal stories with medical and hospital professionals, counselors, therapists, and NICU moms and dads from across the country. Whether you're preparing for a NICU stay, you're currently there, or you're months and years past your stay, you belong here. The NICU is hard. We're here to help. I'm your host, Catherine Whitaker, the mom of 6 children, including my very own NICU baby, and I'm so honored you're here. Howdy, y'all. Welcome back to the podcast. I'm so happy that you're here. We are almost halfway through April. That happened. I don't know how that happened. I love the conversations that I'm having. I hope that you're enjoying them too. I don't know how many of y'all know that April the 11th through the 17th is Black Maternal Health Awareness Week, but we're going to talk about that. We're going to dive into that. It seemed like the perfect time to do it during this awareness week, but also I think I have the perfect guest. She is a beautiful Black woman who is also the mom of quads. I don't know how many moms of there can't be that many moms of quads out there. She fit a lot of boxes, and I think her story of what she experienced as a Black woman going through her pregnancy, but certainly interacting with her own OB-GYN and her maternal fetal medicine doctor, I just found her to be just an advocate. And I think that as you listen to this, you will be empowered, particularly if you're a woman of color. So I think that it's going to be a great episode. I hope y'all are ready to visit with her. So my guest today is Justina Kopp. She lives in the Twin Cities with her husband, Matthew, and their quadruplets. She is a 2013 graduate of the University of St. Thomas, where she studied Catholic Studies and biology. Currently, Justina is pursuing a master's degree in marriage and family therapy at St. Mary's University of Minnesota. So without further ado, let's chat. Well, I'm thrilled to have Justina here today. You are like a treasure trove of information. I think the first time that I ever met you was online, as all good friendships are. But you were in some photos with a photographer that we've used before. And then I saw you later and I was like, I put 2 and 2 together like, hey, she wasn't like a stock photo. She was a real person that now I see. And I love it. I love it. But what I loved about your whole beautiful story, there are not very many moms of quads. And surely the moment that y'all found out that you were pregnant with quadruplets was probably a big one. So do you want to tell us a little bit about finding out that you were pregnant with not 1, 2, or 3 babies, but 4 babies?
Yeah. So I sort of just like background information, I have PCOS. And so I knew that my journey to motherhood could potentially be a bit rocky. And so we had gotten pregnant right away after we had gotten married, and unfortunately had a miscarriage like 2 months later. So that was very early. And then I had like issues with my fertility returning, and I was just after that happens, like all the like warm, fuzzy, like super hopeful, optimistic feelings sort of go away, where you're like, oh, I know that it can go wrong now. And you're just sort of disillusioned by it all. So going through the process of trying to get my body to cooperate and trying to get my body to work as it was supposed to, when I finally did get pregnant, I was immediately so nervous. And because of my medical history, I got an early ultrasound. And beforehand, I had this very specific pain on my right ovary. And I was absolutely convinced going in that we were going to get bad news again. I was convinced that I was having an ectopic pregnancy. Now, my labs did not reflect that. My labs definitely reflected that there was more than one person hanging out in there. But it had already happened before. So,
Sure.
So we're there for the ultrasound. My husband is able to be there with me. And the first image that I see on the screen are these 4 gestational sacs. And I immediately tell myself, Justina, you're not a sonographer. You don't know what you're talking about. You don't know what those are. Let the lady do her job. And sure enough, she starts labeling. She goes to 1, she labels it baby A. And she's like smiling. And this is the same sonographer that had been there when we found out that we'd lost our first baby. So it was all just a very like emotion, like high emotion moment. She goes and she labels the second one baby B. And my husband's like, hey, so why does it say that? And she's like, well, I think you've got more than one in here. And so we laugh. And she goes to the third sac. She labels a baby C. And my husband turns to me and he's like, hey, how are we going to take care of three babies? And I say, well, Matthew, something really cool happens to mothers who have triplets is that they actually grow a third arm during the pregnancy to be able to accommodate that other baby. And so that was the vibe in the room at that point, because we had seen heartbeats. We had never seen that before. Everything was good. And then it was like super good, like abundantly good. And we get to the fourth sac and we don't see anything. And so we think, okay, blighted ovum. A whole thing happens. Doctor comes in. I'm like, hey, I only got pictures of the first two. We didn't get one of the third one. So they go back in to get a picture of the third one. Check that fourth sac out again. And wouldn't you know, that's my super mischievous fourth child. And so we just laughed for 2 straight days, like just laughed, because it was so not what I was expecting and so abundant that we couldn't, it was just so much joy. And then we panicked after that.
That's the reality, right? The joy, and then, oh my Lord, what did we just get ourselves into? So what was your relationship like with your OB-GYN? Did you have the same OB-GYN that you had when you miscarried, when you were pregnant with the 4 babies, or was it a different OB?
So it was the same OB in the sense that like he had helped me through my fertility issues. And then the clinic that I went to, but it was a Christian, like pro-life clinic. So they were very life affirming, which is what we wanted. And so they sort of helped us through the process. Like, we aren't able to be your provider, your main provider, but there were things that when we did go see a specialist, they weren't willing to do that this other clinic did. So I saw him throughout the entire thing, even though it made the other folks mad. But if I hadn't done that, I would have, I don't know if people would know who I am, because I think I would have had a very different set of circumstances. But yeah, so I saw my regular OB and then some perinatal specialists. Yep.
Yeah, I mean, actually, the real reason that I reached out to you was because of this statement. So you recently wrote an essay in Mothering Spirit, and these were your opening words in that essay. You said, I'm very frustrated. I don't understand why you can't be confident in our care. And those words were spoken by your maternal fetal medicine doctor. How did that make you feel, Justina?
Even just writing those words down, I had never actually written them down before, because anytime when I told my husband, when I told my doula, when I talked to anybody about it, it was always spoken. And writing them down, I remember all of it just sort of flooded back into me of like, I can feel it right now, of like just being in that chair, and I have all of this life inside of me, and I'm trying my hardest to just do everything I can to make sure that we can get to where we want to go, so that I can meet them face to face, and I'm just asking questions. I'm not making demands. I know that I am not a doctor. And for her to say that to me, I just remember all of the, like everything just sort of drained out of me, where I was like, I'm in trouble right now. Like, I don't understand why. Like, all I did was ask, okay, here's something I read about. Here's something someone told me about. Would that be something we can do here? Or at that point in the pregnancy, when that conversation, when she yelled at me, I said, that was in direct reference to me asking about the birth, wanting to be like, how is this going to go? Because up until that point, it was like 20 something weeks. No one had talked to me about what birth was going to look like. No one was talking to me about what our circumstances were going to be, what I needed to look out for. And me asking was like a threat to her, and I could not understand it. Like, And I felt like I was in trouble. And I'm like, I know I'm not doing anything wrong right now. So why do I feel like I'm doing something wrong? And just like feeling like I was like, it just immediately not safe.
Well, you were advocating for your babies, but I think sometimes we start to wonder who's advocating for the mom. You're the carrier, like you said, of all that life. So when you leave that room, and thank you, by the way, for sharing this. I know this is hard for you. When you leave that room, how does that affect your further interaction with that particular doctor, your interactions with maternal fetal medicine doctors in general, feeling like, am I being heard? Am I being listened to? And are people validating my concerns? And also a normal thing to ask, how am I going to deliver 4 babies? Because there's not too many books about that. So those are all valid questions. So,
There's like
but
one book on it.
so how did that change your interaction with her and sort of your mindset as you continue the pregnancy?
So immediately after that, I needed to schedule my next appointment. So I walked over and I requested specifically that I would not see her again. Which was not a hard thing to do because this is a practice that has many doctors. So from that point on, I did not see her and saw many others. And I was not allowed to go to appointments by myself. Per my other doctor's recommendation, per my husband, per my doula, they're like, you can't go by yourself. It's not safe. And they're not listening to you. So I had friends, or some of my sisters-in-law would go with me. My mother-in-law came with me to a few appointments. And that it was like simultaneously like frustrating that I had to do that.
Sure.
And also very affirming to have these people that believed in me, and that when they witnessed if someone else said something or treated me a certain way, because I'm sure that other doctor went in and was like, she is non-compliant, and that they all see that in my chart, like, so they probably have their whole preconceived notion of who I am too. But I loved that I had other women that were there to support me, many of them moms themselves, and they had had very different experiences, not just because they didn't have quadruplets, but because their care was just so much different than what I was getting. But that was not the last time that I saw that particular doctor, because I'd had a scheduled C-section date for these kids. The goal was to make it to 34 weeks. I made it to 33.
Good job. That's impressive with 4 babies.
I did my best. Yes.
You did amazing.
And the way that all went down was because of me still seeing the other doctor, the other clinic, that they had caught that I was very sick, that I had preeclampsia and elevated like liver enzymes and all the things that they were like
the classic symptoms of preeclampsia. Yeah.
And bordering on HELLP syndrome, where they're like, she's got it. It's time. Yeah. I was actually about to go to a specialist appointment, and I got a call from my doctor that was like, hey, you got to go to the hospital. I already called him. I already let him know you're on your way. I was like, sweet. Called my sister-in-law. I was like, actually, we're not going to need you.
What a great advocate and that doctor that they saw what you needed and then they acted, instead of you feeling like you were always having to ask the question. I mean, the elephant in the room is that the mortality rates of Black women who are pregnant are significantly higher than women of any other race. And the CDC, as I'm reading through all of their statistics, it's frightening to think about how many women may be in your position, but may not have the women to accompany them to the appointments, or may not know what questions to ask or how to advocate for themselves. This podcast is produced by Hand to Hold, a national nonprofit, but we're more than simply a podcast. Be sure to download our app, join one of our support groups, or find one-to-one support, enjoy counseling, find loss and bereavement support, participate in a peer-to-peer mentor program, or check out our news, articles, and family stories at handtohold.org. All of that is at no cost to you. Hand to Hold's mission is to provide personalized support before, during, and after a NICU stay to help ensure that all NICU families thrive. As you sort of march toward your delivery date, what, if anything, did they prepare you for a NICU stay? Anything about the NICU? What were some things that they shared with you that might have been helpful or not helpful?
So after that, I the nurse after that like awful appointment where I was like, I don't know what's coming. She's like, oh, you want to learn about that?
Oh my gosh.
Yes. um like not only do I care about them, but I also am like, I'm gonna be there, so I'd like to know what's happening. And so we had a hospital tour and a NICU tour. The nurse who brought us through, that was one of the coldest things that I have ever been a part of in the world of birth. Like, this is going to be a very big day. Yes, it's going to be a little scary. Um, but it's my kids are going to be born. Like, I've been thinking about the moment that I have kids, like ever since
Right.
I was a kid. Like, I have an idea in my head of how it's going to go, of who is going to be there and what it's going to look like and how I'm going to feel throughout all of it. And then getting this tour and like learning about, okay, well, this is where they will go and this is how they will be wheeled around. And it wasn't like, it was just like, any questions? And then there were things that I was asking about. They're like, oh yeah, I should tell you about that. I'm like, what is happening here? Does anyone know? I know that there was no one on my birth team that had worked with quadruplets, not a single one. So I'm like,
Wow.
I know that we've never dealt with this before, but we've dealt with other high risk situations. So surely there's like some code of like bedside manner that we should be attending to, but
So
yeah.
when
So
you Yeah, I think it all depends on a lot of factors, but one, just recognizing that you're a human being that has these babies, and everybody's end goal is the same, that you want those babies to leave the NICU healthy and happy and in their mom and dad's arms. So to walk into a space where you don't feel welcome, when you know that that's the place that's going to nurture and save them before they can, do the next thing, meet the next milestone, that had to have been a really hard a really hard way to enter into that. So they're born at 33 weeks. How much time did y'all spend in the neonatal intensive care unit?
um they were only in the like NICU proper for 2.5 days. And then they spent the rest of their time in the special care nursery. Um, they ended up, when I had gotten admitted, um, 2 days prior, because I was sick, I got the steroid shots to help with um, lung development there at the end. So only two of them were intubated right away, baby one and baby four. And then by day two, everyone was on room air,
It's
which
remarkable.
was just wild to me because that was not at all what I was expecting. Um, I myself am a NICU baby. That was
Oh, I
not
didn't
my
know that.
story. Like, that
Oh
was
my
not how
gosh.
that went for me. So I was very shocked at just how quickly that had all progressed. And then they were just mastering feeds for the rest of the time. That like it was just this like steady progression of just like they were just getting better. And I I still can't believe it. Like, I still don't understand how, like, after all of the just muck that we had to wade through the pregnancy, I was expecting that, this was still just going to be really awful. That there was just more bad was going to happen. And that never came for us. So I just feel incredibly lucky that that was how that went for them. But
It's not often that you hear that quadruplets are just in the feeder grower area of the neonatal
yeah,
intensive care unit. That certainly
yeah,
that's not the norm. So, Justina, as you sort of think about the quadruplet, the double twins, sorry,
super twins.
the super twins, that's right, are about 4 years old. So, as you look over this last 4 years of
Well, there's
how you, and
six.
oh, they're six. Oh, I was thinking there were four. I had four on the brain. They're six. Your four children are six. So as you look over this last little bit of time, how has that experience changed how you view healthcare, changed how you advocate for yourself and your children?
So I really look for a doctor or like a healthcare provider that is willing to be collaborative, that like values my input because it is my body. At the end of the day, I'm the person that has to deal with the symptoms. I'm the person that has to exist with this. So whatever I'm facing, I want someone to believe me, and I want someone to admit that they might not know everything. Not that I'm coming in as an expert, but that like I might have something that they might not be thinking of, that they might know about, but it's just not on the front of their brain, or it's something that that they're open to looking into themselves. And just like taking like just remaining curious. That was just so frustrating to me that it felt like those doctors wanted to be the authority more than they wanted to work with me, that like I was just like this like just gestational carrier just there, like that I was just this faceless person that could not shut up about, hey, I want to be alive too at the end, like
Right.
yeah, so I look for that. And like
I love the way you said that, though, that you're looking for someone who encourages you to be curious. I think
yeah,
sometimes we see curiosity as a threat when really it's just as a desire to understand. And so
yeah,
curiosity is a good thing.
I'm currently in school to get my master's in to become a marriage and family therapist. And I had someone tell us, like, one of my professors said that the moment you cease to be, the moment you deem yourself an expert, you cease to be curious. Um, the moment you think that you know everything about something, you stop learning because you're like, well, I already know it.
Right.
And you stop being curious and you stop growing. Like, isn't that the point of all of this? Like that we're always learning, there's always more, and you can't know it all. But it was just really frustrating when doctors acted like they did.
Well, I'm glad that you recognized things that you needed to do to get to the end goal of delivering healthy babies and you being a healthy mom. And while I have no doubt, certainly I'll make sure that we link to the essay because I think it's really well written, and from a place of deep vulnerability. But it begs the bigger question of why does this happen and what can we do to change it? That's not okay. So I'm grateful that you shared that. So if Justina always asks this, it's always the last question that I ask every guest for advice. So if there's a woman listening to this who's a woman of color who finds herself in a pregnancy and is struggling to be heard, struggling to be seen, what would your advice be to her?
You gotta assemble your dream team. You've gotta you have to have people in your corner that believe in you, because otherwise you're just, still be exhausting even if you have those people. But it meant so much to me to be believed by my loved ones, and that they were willing to support me and like kept me going through it all. And they wanted the same thing that I did. They wanted all five of
Mhm.
us to be there at the end too, so that, find your people. And then just sort of, logistically within that space, having a doula, it was like a must for me. I don't know how I would have done, how I would have navigated things like if I didn't have that. Um, there were things that she straight up had to go and demand on my behalf, because me asking for it was just not getting through to anybody. Like I think of, um, I wanted to at least pump and to attempt breastfeeding with my kids. And I think the advice is that like within 6 hours or something after a C-section that you should try to get a pump on mom. 25 hours. 25 hours. And then I got advice that was, you can sleep at night as long as you just like pump 8 times during the day. Just get them all. Just like try to get those like squeezed in during the day. And then you can you got to protect your precious sleep because you got all those babies. I'm like, no, that's not how it works.
I'm sure the lactation consultants would probably be agreeing with you and whoever gave you that bad advice that,
Yeah.
yeah,
But then because I had people advocating for me,
right.
I had enough around me to know that I could go find the right answers because I knew that this wasn't working. Because like then I was discharged because I was in the hospital for 3 days after they were born, and then it was like goodbye, good luck. And so it was a NICU or a special care nursery nurse who was also an IBCLC, and she was like, "Hey, so I just have noticed some things," and she just asked me questions, and I could recognize in her immediately that I could trust her, um, and that she was looking out for me, and she was looking out for them, not just trying to look out for my convenience. Like, if I wanted a convenient life, this would look very different.
Well,
Um,
that's excellent advice, and I love. I think that's a good way to end it. Is that your instinct as a woman and as a mom tells you who you can trust and who you can't. So, Justina, thank you for sharing your heart and some hard places, but I'm hopeful that it may help some women along the way.
yeah, thank you so much for having me.
Of course. Well, wasn't she great? I knew that y'all were going to love her. In today's 2-minute take, there's a lot to take away from our entire conversation. One is that she is one strong mama. I've given birth to 6 children, but they were individually. I have never given birth to 4 babies at the same time. I did love her when she recounted what it was like when she found out, she and her husband, that they were having 4 babies. For me, the thing that really stuck with me, and I felt like it was a theme all the way through, was at the very end, her advice to women of color is to assemble your dream team. That I think through her story, I think she really embodied what that looks like, whether that's having someone come to the appointment with you, if an interaction goes absolutely not the way that you want it to, how do you change that? Do you ask to not see that doctor again? Do you change who you go to? Whatever it may be, I felt like she gave some really good practical advice on how you can be a better advocate for you and for your babies. I think I mentioned it in the interview, but Black women are 3 times more likely to die from causes of pregnancy than white women. So it is absolutely an important week as we celebrate Black Maternal Health Awareness Week. And I'm so grateful that Justina very vulnerably and very honestly shared a difficult part of her story, but that it didn't end there, and that she is and continues to be a great advocate for women. And I am deeply grateful for her story. So, with that, we will wrap it up, and I will see y'all next time. Thanks, y'all, for listening to NICU Babies Parent Support. Every parent and every experience is welcome here. If you are a NICU parent and you're finding yourself in need of support, please download our app. You can find it in the Apple Store or on Google Play, Hand to Hold. And if you love today's episode, you can share it, you can subscribe, and you can most certainly review it. We would love, love, love your reviews. It's how we reach more NICU parents. Thanks, and I'll see y'all next time.